All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to crack open the Professional's Toolkit for Project Management. Now, forget everything you think you know about boring manuals and endless charts. We're going to demystify the real, practical tools that pros use to turn total chaos into success. I want you to think about it for a second. Have you ever been on a project that just felt off? You know, that group assignment in college, a product lunch at work, heck, even just trying to plan a big family vacation. We've all been there. Deadlines are slipping, no one's quite sure who's doing what, and the whole thing just feels like it's spiraling out of control. It's a feeling we all know, and it's incredibly frustrating. But what if I told you there's a way to actually prevent all that chaos? The pros don't just wing it. They use a very specific, proven set of techniques to navigate all those challenges. So today, let's you and I open up that toolkit together and see exactly what's inside. So, the very first tool we're pulling out of the kit, well, it has absolutely nothing to do with schedules or budgets. It's all about people. Because at the end of the day, every single project lives or dies based on the people involved. Let's talk about how to engage your key players. First things first, we have to know who we're actually dealing with. The professional term for this is a stakeholder. And it's a really simple idea. It's anyone, an individual, a group, an entire organization who can either help your project or harm it. This could be your boss, sure, but it could also be your team, your customer, or even a totally different department. Step one is just figuring out who they all are. Okay, so once you know who they are, the next step is to understand them. And the pros break this down into two really simple dimensions. First, you've got power, or influence. How much can this person actually change the project's outcome? And second, you have interest. How much is the project's outcome going to affect them? And these are two totally different things, right? You really need to analyze both. And that analysis, it directly tells you what to do. It builds your strategy. So if a stakeholder has high power and high interest, well, you need to manage them closely. They're your key players. Someone with high power but pretty low interest, your job is to just keep them satisfied. Now, what about low power but high interest? Keep them informed. They can be your biggest cheerleaders. And finally, low power and low interest, you just monitor them, no need to overdo it. You know, we often think that power just means a fancy job title. But this quote is so important because it reminds us that real influence isn't always about rank. The person with high power might be that one essential expert on your team or a key end user of your product. It's not always the vice president. Okay, you've identified and analyzed your stakeholders. Awesome. Now let's talk about the people who are actually doing the work, your team. And here's the thing, it's not enough to just throw a bunch of smart people in a room and hope for the best. You have to actively build them into a high-performing unit. There's a really famous model for this from a psychologist named Bruce Tuckman. He realized that pretty much every team follows a pattern. It starts with forming, that's the honeymoon phase, where everyone's polite and maybe a little anxious. Then comes storming. This is where differences pop up and, little conflict arises. It can be uncomfortable. But it's what leads to norming, where the team figures out how to work together. And only then can they reach performing, where they're operating like a well-oiled machine. Now that storming phase, it feels like a problem, right? It feels like something you should try to stop. But here's the crucial insight. It's a necessary step. If you try to avoid all that friction, all that conflict, you're actually preventing your team from ever gelling, from ever reaching that high-performance stage. So the big takeaway here is that a little bit of managed conflict is actually healthy. All right, let's shift gears from the people side of things over to the process side. A massive part of any project is just trying to figure out how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. This is the art and the science of estimating the unknown. Okay, here's a super common point of confusion we need to clear up right now. An estimate is not a single number. It never is. A real, professional estimate is a range of possible outcomes. A pro knows the work might take, say, somewhere between 50 and 80 hours. The budget, on the other hand, that's the single number, like 65 hours, that management uses for planning and control. Acknowledging that uncertainty is the key to good estimating. So, how do you actually create that range? Well, pros use this incredibly simple but really powerful technique called a three-point estimate. You don't just pull one number out of thin air. You ask for three. First, what's the optimistic scenario if every single thing goes perfectly? Second, what's the most likely outcome, realistically? And third, what's the pessimistic scenario if Murphy's Law kicks in and everything goes wrong? And then you can turn those 3 points into a single, much more reliable estimate. There's a popular formula that gives extra weight to that most likely number. So in this example from our source, let's say a task has an optimistic time of 4 days, a pessimistic time of 12 days, but it's most likely to take 5 days. You run the numbers through the formula, and you get a weighted estimate of 6 days. See? That's a much more realistic figure than just a wild guess. So, you've got your plan, you've got your estimate, you're all set, right? Haha, not even close. A plan is basically useless if you don't actually track your progress against it. So the next tool in our kit is all about answering one very simple question. Are we on track? This chart gives us a project health check using a really cool technique called earned value management. So let's look at this snapshot. The plan said we should have completed $384,000 worth of work by now. Okay, we look at the books and see we've actually spent $420,000, and here's the kicker, the value of the work we've actually finished is only $210,000. So we're spending way more money to get way less work done. Not good. Now, we can boil all of that down to a single, really clear metric for how efficiently we're using money. It's called the Cost Performance Index, or CPI. And the formula is simple. It's just your earned value divided by your actual cost. And this is why it is so brilliant. Using the numbers from our example, the CPI works out to 0.50. So what does that even mean? You don't need to be an accountant to get this. It means that for every single dollar we are spending on this project, we are only getting 50 cents worth of completed work back. That is a crystal clear signal that this project is in serious trouble financially. And that brings us to the final, and you could argue maybe the most important tool in our whole toolkit. See, no project ever goes exactly to plan. It just doesn't happen. Change is absolutely inevitable. The key isn't to prevent change, but to control it. And the stakes here could not be higher. This quote says it all. It isn't change itself that sinks projects. It's uncontrolled change. All those small requests and little tweaks that just keep adding up and completely derail the budget and the schedule, and nobody even notices until it's too late. It has a name. It's called scope creep. So the secret weapon against this is having a formal process for every single change. It's simple. First, you identify and document the request. No more hallway conversations. Then you analyze it. You estimate its impact on the cost, on the schedule, on risk. Third, it has to be formally approved or rejected by the people in charge. And only if it's approved do you implement it and update all your plans. This process turns chaos into an orderly, conscious decision. So there you have it. From managing stakeholders and building teams, to estimating work, tracking your performance, and controlling change. When you look at them all together, you see this isn't just a collection of abstract ideas. It's a real, practical, interconnected toolkit that professionals use every single day to take a goal and turn it into reality. And listen, this isn't just for building skyscrapers or launching software for some big corporation. I want you to think about a goal that you have right now. Maybe you're planning a wedding, starting a side business, trying to write a thesis. Which of these tools could you use to bring just a little more order to that chaos, a little more certainty to your success? What project in your life needs this toolkit?